Good afternoon. Welcome to the Magic of Human Beings. I'm Karol Cristina da Silva. This week episode I would like to dedicate to the giant jazz musician Chick Corea. He died on 9th of February at the age of 79 of a rare form of cancer. He was a powerful musician, a giant pianist. And I would like to share with you the message he left for those he knew and loved, and for all of those who loved him. I want to thank all of those along my journey who have helped keep the music fires burning bright. It is my hope that those who have an inkling to play, write, perform, or otherwise do so. If not for yourself, then for the rest of us. It's not only that the world needs more artists, it's also just a lot of fun. And to my amazing musician friends who have been like family to me, as long as I've known you, it has been a blessing and an honor learning from and playing with all of you. My mission has always been to bring the joy of creating anywhere I could, and to have done so with all the artists that I admire so dearly. This has been the richness of my life. So to Chick Corea, which I met once briefly at Barbican backstage when I went to hear him playing with Herbie Hancock, two titans of the piano. And a dear friend of mine that I love so much, also a jazz pianist, took me backstage. And he was just so humble and so incredible. And he was traveling with these little packs of biscuits that his wife made and giving to friends. So he gave one to my friend and had all these little hearts. Was beautiful. Chick, we salute you. So now we have Christopher Dance, and I think of Chris went about this quote by Gandhi: "Be the change you wish to see in the world." Yeah, it makes me think of Chris. You are gonna meet this artist of life, activist. Let me invite Chris. Okay, send request. So now we are waiting for Chris' request. Hello, Alex. Hello, Joconda. Hello, Eliane. So Chris should be here soon. We practiced yesterday. It took us a little bit of time, but we figured it out. Hello. Oi, Joconda. Hey, Alex. So, Chris, let's see what... Yes, Chick Corea. So, I'm gonna invite him again. Christopher, send request.
Ah!
Good! Peace.
Can you hear me, dear Karol?
Yes, I can.
everything seems to be working well.
Yeah.
That's you know me and technical hitches.
Well, but luckily we practiced yesterday a few times, and
We did. I'll just check my volume. Is the volume okay?
yes, the volume is good.
Great. Great. Well, here we are. Good to see
Oh,
you.
good to see you. I don't know if you heard in the beginning the introduction that I made dedicated to Chick Corea.
Oh, fantastic. Because I posted something this morning. I saw that he sadly passed away, and I put something on Facebook. Fantastic. What a lovely way to, you know, dedicate his life. And
I know you're
yeah,
a jazz lover.
Yeah, amongst other things. I mean, not quite as much as you and Claudio, but yeah, it's a big part of my listening. I mean, and people like Chick Corea, I mean, amazing contribution they've made to music in the 20th and 21st century. Yeah, sure.
Oh.
Yeah.
So good to have you, Chris.
Nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh,
I hope you can come up with something to talk about, some stimulating conversation.
Yes, and we have quite a few friends around. Bunny's there. So, how about if we start by your background? Tell us a little bit about you. Where do you come from?
Okay, I'm an Essex boy. I was born in a small, well, a sort of medium-sized industrial town in Essex called Chelmsford, which, you know, as I was growing up, was very much a sort of a working class industrial, small, medium-sized town. I grew up in a council estate. I was the youngest of four boys. My poor mother, bless her. My father left when I was 3, and I never saw him again.
Wow.
So he left my mother with 4 children to cope with, and not much money. So our childhood was quite poor. But I think, you know, at that time in the early 60s, we lived in more of an economy of need. There wasn't this sort of rampant consumerism. So I sensed we sort of had what we needed, and we didn't really question beyond that. I remember my childhood being very happy, actually. I think I got a lot of love from my mother. We lived right on the edge of the town, so there was loads of country to explore, and my whole childhood was spent sort of immersed in nature, really. It was interesting listening to Tony's interview last week and him saying how much freedom he had growing up around a similar time. And I thought, yeah, it was exactly the same as us. We had so much freedom. I mean, partly, you know, my mother had to work, and we just got on with it. So it was a sort of happy time, despite, you know, a lot of economic uncertainty and hardship, really.
And then you went on to studies, to boarding school.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting part of my life. When I was aged 11, I was sent away to school because I think my poor mother I think she was exhausted, really. My two oldest brothers had left home by this time. There was quite a gap between them and myself and my next oldest brother. So we were sent to a boarding school that was run by the local council. So it wasn't a posh place at all. And we went there because we got a sort of a grant, and it didn't cost my mother any money. And I think she felt that we would get a better education there, which sadly wasn't the case. It was a very hard time for me. That I think, one, leaving my home and my friends, leaving my mother, and the school was quite an inhumane place. It was hard. The teachers were bullies. A lot of them were quite sadistic. corporal punishment was on the rampage at that time. I mean, it's amazing to think that, 40, 50 years ago, teachers could thrash kids with canes and slippers and hit them and nothing would. It was completely normal. And I think this school really had cultivated a culture of this sort of punishment. So it wasn't a nice place. So I think I became very rebellious as a result of that experience, anti-authority. I became and quite angry, I think. I think I think this sort of perceived rejection from my mother, which wasn't a rejection, but I think at that age I saw it as being abandoned. And two, the sort of the austerity of the culture I had to spend 5 years in. And then I think, I became very angry, and I didn't. 5 years from 11 till 16, and then I left school, and that was that, really. And then I proceeded to do, I didn't have very much in the way of qualifications. I did a job on a farm, and then this may sound strange coming from someone who's now a vegan, but I got a job as a laboratory technician, post-morteming animals that were being used on scientific and clinical trials. And I did that for a couple of years. And then there was a sort of a slow dawning that I just didn't really have any great ambition in terms of wanting to do a particular job or a career. And then I did my first hitchhiking journey around Europe. And that was for 3 months. And that was the beginning. I went to Morocco, and that was the beginning of my sense of searching for freedom, really, searching for something that made sense, rather than a lot of things that didn't really make sense. I just didn't. I think, like a lot of people at that age, I felt a lot of confusion. I didn't really know what my direction was, and they were the sort of years of beginning the search, beginning the journey.
But it's beginning the search and traveling and all over Europe with. And how about money? How were you funding yourself?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I never had much money. I don't know how we sort of managed. For example, when I went, the world was a very different place when I was doing these things. And, for example, when I was hitchhiking around Europe, we would knock on the door in the vineyards and get a job picking grapes. And then that would pay enough money to sort of, living very cheaply, living camping, and not really living a life that costs very much money, bumming it, really.
Bumming it.
What we used to call bumming around, sleeping on beaches, getting on trains without a ticket. It wasn't all good, really.
And then
I made my first trip to Israel.
Okay.
And I worked on a kibbutz, and then I came back, and then I went back to Israel and spent 8 months working on these sort of collective farms where I was earning a little bit of money. And then I started traveling around the Middle East. I went to Egypt and Turkey, and again it just seemed what I wanted. I just wanted adventure. I just wanted to sort of get away from the narrow sort of world that I felt I was being offered as a young man without really any qualifications. And the sort of conventional life never really attracted me at that time.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it did really, but
yeah. And I'm trying to think about your being brought up in the Thatcher years, and also the boarding school authority, and how that formed, like how being young, through all of this going, injustice that you probably fought, made you in search of something else?
Yeah, I mean that's a big question, and I think a very interesting one, because I think making that link is actually there is a very direct link, I think, between those events. And I think when I eventually moved to Brighton, when I was about I don't know, 21, 22, I just fell into this, I got very involved in left-wing politics. And at that time, the Thatcher years, there was so much conflict going on between, obviously, the left and the right. The left was very factionalized, and I joined a group called the Socialist Workers' Party, and we got very active in the great miners' strike of 1984, when there was this very, very bitter dispute between the coal miners and the government, because the government was trying to shut the coal mines down, and at the same time the government knew that if it could break the back of the miners' union, it would break the back of the mining, the whole trade union movement, and it succeeded. The government succeeded in doing that. So it was a bitter time, but it was a very exciting time. And also around that time, there were things like the Anti-Nazi League, the apartheid movement, where we used to go into supermarkets and trash all the fruit that came from South Africa. We would literally just destroy it, which I wouldn't do now, but it was hard stuff, really. And whenever there were protests and demonstrations, it was always with the police. It was always very violent and confrontational, but there was something very exciting in all that for me, because I think I was angry and I was surrounded by angry people, and it felt like a sort of a justification to be able to express all that anger that I'd had about boarding school, about my father, all this sort of shit that I felt it gave me agency. It gave me license to sort of express myself, and it wasn't always pretty, and I'm not always proud of it, but I think it was a good vehicle for me. I think I look back on those times with incredible fondness. It was a really amazing time for me, because at that point in my life, I sort of felt I was I'd landed where I wanted to be at last. It sort of answered some of my deeper questions, and I also my interest in my passion for socialism, I carry today. It's part of my sort of worldview, and it was very much formulated in that time in Brighton. It was a great place to live.
And from there, when did photography came to your life?
Right. Well, in 1988, after years and years and years of dreaming of going to India, I finally saved up enough money, and I thought, right, this is it. I'm going to India, and I left for India, and I ended up staying there for 8 months and just travelled hard. It was just wonderful. It was just everything I had dreamed about India being was sort of confirmed in a way. It was even better. I just couldn't believe what I had landed in. It was just a fantastic experience for me to, you look like you're on the cusp of asking a question about that.
I'm thinking, why India? Like, did you have an influence? Did something inspire you? Why India?
Yeah, I mean, it had always been a sort of, people had been traveling overland and going to India. It sort of started in the 60s, I was very interested in that whole sort of culture of people going to India to, you know, the cliche was, you know, go to India and find yourself. And I thought, what's this all about? And I loved Indian food, and there was just something so seductive about the idea of getting lost in this country, you know, that was so far removed from our kind of Western experience of life. And as I say, everything was confirmed there for me. I just loved it. I just, you know, I traveled hard for 8 months. I went to Nepal. I went into the Himalayas. I did one retreat at a Tibetan meditation center, which sort of, it kindled my interest, but my passion hadn't really, it didn't evolve on that trip. It just germinated a seed, I think.
Just kindle it.
Yeah, but to come back to your original question about photography, I took a camera with me.
Okay.
And when I came back, my brother was a photographer, and he sort of looked through my stuff and he said, "You got some good stuff here." And I just thought, right, I'm gonna go to art school. And I got a portfolio together. I applied to art school and I was offered a place. And that, again, another 3 years, I sort of going from India and then going into art school, and it was a huge moment for me. It was like given 3 years to play creatively, and I made some great friends there, and it felt like the beginning of another phase of my life.
Okay.
And yeah, I came out. That was the other thing. I think it really boosted my confidence, because I didn't have much. I didn't have many academic credentials before then, and I sort of doubted my abilities academically, even though I was reading a lot, and I obviously wasn't a dimwit, but I didn't have the sort of sense of confidence that a lot of people have, coming through the sort of education system. I felt I'd been failed by it, to be honest.
Yeah.
Various reasons, some mine. I'm not just pointing a finger at the education system. Some of it was coming from me, but whatever the reasons, I felt I'd failed. So actually going to art school and getting a degree was fantastic. I felt great. And I loved it. It was 3 really good years. And again, it was a very, very, quite a radical course, really. And all our lecturers are all left-wing. They were all very inspiring. It was just great to be in that intellectual, creative environment, really. I felt, again, I sort of felt very at home in it. And yeah, that was that. And
then
episode.
Did you start taking photos? And
I moved to London, and my intention was to work hard at being a photographer and to establish a career. And in some ways, I sort of felt that it might in some way vindicate my sort of need for a direction in life, which I felt I hadn't found other than, traveling and searching. And I felt that, doing something like photography would fulfill some of those needs and give me a career. Did that for a few years, and I got a teaching job. I taught in Reigate School of Art for a while, which was interesting, but it just dawned on me after 4 or 5 years, the struggle, the trying to establish myself, sending my portfolio here and there, I just wasn't passionate about it. I was passionate about the photography, but I had no passion about the career. It was the same old thing for me. It was like, oh God, is this ever going to end? This kind of search to try and make something of my life in that sort of that sort of conventional way. So it was a conflict, really. There was a conflict between this sort of strong desire for travel and adventure, and also to actually have some sort of identity, some sort of badge that I could say, yeah, I'm this, and this is what I do. And it wasn't really to be, because as I say, I got disillusioned quite quickly, and that sort of went on and on. I was working, doing up houses actually, which was great. I was getting a good income. I was getting lots of work from my landlord at the time. And then I started going to India in the winter, coming back, going to India in the winter, coming back. That went on for a few years. And then finally at the, I guess it was actually when I was 40, which, you know, that was the age I decided to give everything up and really investigate this sort of inner yearning once and for all. I'd become interested in meditation during those years in London. I was going to sort of evening meditation drop-in courses in various different centres in London. I was trying things out, and I was beginning to get a sense of something deepening and a sort of a growing yearning to really investigate this thing. And that sort of coincided with my sense of disillusion with, you know, basically living in London and doing work was just basically paying for me to do something else, which was to go travelling. So I gave up work. I got rid of all my possessions. I'd been living in the same house for 10 years. I told them I was leaving, packed up and went. That was it. But, yeah, I put a few books in my brother's garage, which actually is still there, funnily enough.
Makes you wonder.
And then,
books.
but the funny thing was, I said, right, I said to everyone, right, I'm going for 2 years. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm just going. And I'm going for 2 years. I had enough money I'd saved up enough money to stay for 2 years. Hadn't really got a clue what I was going to do, except pursue this sense of, you know, I wanted to find out what this meditation thing was about. And that 2 years became 10 years. I was away for 10 years. I went to India. First place I went to was Shivananda Yoga Ashram, and I had a wonderful time there. And then I went to Sri Lanka, and I went to a Buddhist meditationary center, and had 3 wonderful months there. And then I met someone, and which is always the way things happen. I met someone and we got chatting, and he said, "Oh, do you know the teacher Christopher Titmuss?" I said, "No, I've never heard of him." And he said, "I think you'd really like him. He teaches in Bodh Gaya. He teaches at two places in northern India every year. And I just think you'd like him." So I went up to Bodh Gaya the next time that Christopher was teaching up there, and did these retreats. I met him, and I met the sort of group of people who were also attending his retreats. And that, you know, I just thought, I just really, something in the way that he taught really landed with me. It was like, it was the thing I liked about Christopher's teachings were they contained a sort of a very radical edge. He didn't shy away from the political, so much of the sort of causes and conditions of our suffering come from politics, come from the sort of the economic system of the world we live in. And he didn't shy away from that in the way that a lot of teachers, I felt, just didn't go there. And I think, you know, his sort of insistence was that, you know, this cultivation of an inner life has to serve the outer in some way. It has to somehow land somewhere in the world where it has a purpose. Otherwise, why are we doing it? Yeah. Is it just to feel good? If I want to feel good, I'd rather just sit under a tree and smoke a joint. I don't want to sit on the cushion cultivating good feelings just to feel good. It has to have some sort of outer application. And that has stayed with me. And, you know, Christopher became, you know, he became my teacher for those years, for that 10 years. I was going back to India. I was doing his retreats, and
I love the way
And
that
it wasn't. Sorry, Karol.
I love the way that he was in touch, like with both sides. What's like his spirituality, but bringing context, like saying, "Look, this is happening here and there, and I'm not happy with that." And
yeah, it was his insistence that you know, while we cultivate these inequalities, we then use that cultivation as an application towards, you know, the whole premise of the Buddha's teachings is the end of suffering. So why follow a path where that's the premise if you're not actually applying what you're learning to that, not only your own suffering but the suffering of all beings? It's not just humans, it's the suffering of all sentient beings, and it's a radical teaching.
Yeah, and saying, talking about the suffering of all beings, there's this quote that you sent me that I think is, when we bear witness, we become the situation, homelessness, poverty, illness, violence, death, the right action arises by itself. We don't have to worry about what to do. We don't have to figure out what to do ahead of time. Peacemaking is the function of bearing witness. Once we
makes my hair stand up. Makes me shiver. It's so profound. I mean, to me, that that one quote underpins so much of what I think the spiritual life is about. And I think Bernie, bless him, he died a couple of years ago, and I never met him, but friends of mine did go to Auschwitz with him to do these retreats in Auschwitz, which was all about perhaps bearing witness in the place where the worst atrocities of the 20th century occurred. Imagine that, you know, you're spending day after day sitting in this place where you know you can't turn away, you can't. And I just think, wow, this is what I aspire to, in a way, is this trying not to turn away. And it's an amazing practice, because it demands a sort of courage. You know, when you see something you don't like. A little story, just a very small example of something that profound that happened to me a couple of weeks ago, just down the road here.
Oh, wait a minute.
Sorry?
Wait a minute. Is that something to do with a lost mobile phone?
No.
No? Okay.
much more interesting. Much more interesting.
Okay.
As you know, I've moved to the high street now. So, and just down the road is a Baptist church, about 3 doors down. And one day I noticed this homeless man lying in the doorway in his sleeping bag. And, you know, his sort of conditions weren't good, really. One day I walked past him and his bare feet were sticking out of the sleeping bag and it was freezing. But something, I don't know, I turned away. I couldn't, I don't know what it was, but I felt this deep desire to make contact with him, but I just kept walking past because I don't know what it was. Sometimes it's a mystery why we can't actually confront something. And then one day I just walked past and I just poked my head round because he was in this sort of little bit, and I said, "Oh, you know, how you doing? You all right?" And he sort of sat up, and we just ended up having one of the loveliest conversations. That, you know, we had a lot in common. We were a similar age. He'd done a degree in politics in Hull University, and we talked for about we had a wonderful conversation. And what I think is the point of what I'm trying to say is that from that fear of making contact with him, there was this transformation into love, just in that in that movement from fear to connection, love arose out of it, you know, this deep sort of, and then I ended up speaking to him every day, take him a hot chocolate and sit down, have a chat. We were talking about the books he was reading, and it was great. And then he, as the cold weather came, he disappeared. I think he went into a centre or something. Because the other thing was, I said, you know, do you have somewhere? Are you sleeping somewhere? Have you been offered somewhere to sleep? And he said, no, I like it here. I like it here. He wanted to be there. It was very, and I just think that's a small example of how our fear can be transformed into something, you know, deeply profound, what I would call love, actually. But as Bernie says, you know, we bear witness. We have to sort of take that step, that courageous step of not turning away.
Yes.
And I think just to come back to India, in India you can't turn away. I think that's one of the incredible things about it, is there's nowhere to turn.
Exactly.
You're confronted with it constantly. There's no escape. You know, it's, for some people it's too much, but for others it's a sort of it's a sort of a waking up to something, in a way, because fear dictates so much of the way we are in our daily lives, much more than we think.
And talking about the homeless, it's I remember a friend who was working for the police force, who told me, it's for someone to become homeless, we don't realize how easy and fast it can be. How suddenly, by just like losing your job, or someone that you love die, you lose someone, and then you get into depression, don't go to work, money's not coming in, you lose this, you lose that, and suddenly you're on the streets. Like, it can happen so fast with so many people.
Yeah, there's, you know, it's been said that we're all 1 or 2 paychecks away from whatever, you know, if we don't get the money. Yeah, it's a fact. I think that's very true. We have to sort of acknowledge our own vulnerability, really.
And those 10 years in India then made many friends, and then...
Yeah, I mean, so many things happened during that time, obviously. I mean, the other thing was that through people I met, I got offered the job in France working in a meditation centre. So it was great, because in the summers I was coming back to Europe, spending a few months working as a gardener and a cook in the meditation centre, and then going back off to India in the winter. And,
so there's a question here from Bharti saying, Chris, do you not think suffering is addictive and an inevitable element of our physical condition?
Well, that's a really good question, Bharti. Yeah, that's a good question. I think I think we need to redefine the word suffering, because I think in Buddhism the word suffering is bandied about. I mean, the Pali word that the Buddha used was dukkha, and I think the early translations of dukkha by Buddhist historians was actually suffering, and it's, even though I used it, I think a more accurate term, or a more accurate translation of dukkha would be unsatisfactoriness. You know, we feel this sense in our lives that there's a prevailing sense, you know, when we're not satisfied. We grasp at things to try and fulfill this sense of unsatisfactoriness that I think is prevailing throughout. You know, it's why consumerism is rampant, because so many people feel unsatisfied for whatever reasons. There's a sort of an inner emptiness that we're always reaching out for something, whatever it is. It might be drink, it might be pleasure, it might be small things, the constant need to turn the radio on, to fill our lives with whatever it is, to try and alleviate that underlying sense of what I would call unsatisfactoriness, anguish, a sort of an absence of feeling fulfilled or good enough. With regards to the addiction, are we addicted to that? I don't think we're addicted. I think we just don't even realise it's there.
Uh-huh.
I'm not sure if that answers your question.
So, Barty, let us know if that answers your question. Chris, there are so many things that I want to talk to you about. It's okay. It makes sense also in consideration of the idea of surrender. So that's what Barty.
Yeah, I mean, surrender is a big word, because it can sound passive. But I think, you know, surrendering, I would say surrendering to what is.
To what is.
To, yeah.
Being
present.
And present.
Being present, not constantly trying to sort of improve this moment. Just being acceptance. Someone's just written acceptance is a good word. I like that. Eye-catching art. I like that. Thank you. Yeah, acceptance. And that doesn't mean being passive, but I mean it's accepting. Well, this is happening right now.
Yeah.
This is what's going.
Yeah, being.
Yeah.
Like now we're talking here, and we don't
Absolutely.
know what's going to happen. What questions will arise? What will?
It's very exciting, isn't it?
Yes.
We're in the moment. Life is exciting.
We are in the moment, and thinking about the moment, the phone came to me, because Chris, when I was researching things about like what you've been doing, and I came across this on Instagram, and I had a big smile on my face. I was like, what? So I saw that you put a post saying, and this was this week, lost my mobile phone, probably in the countryside between Wick, Dartington, and Buckfast. If anyone who is a member of the Totinesians Facebook page sees I found Samsung A50 phone, can you message me on Facebook, please? Many thanks. Oh, Chris, that was about this.
What about it? I mean, Totnes is like that.
I was like, what? So a friend of yours, Inez Aponte, said, I just shared it on the Dartington Noteboard page. And then once it's been found, I love the comments. I love these little harmonies in life's long song, much needed. Claire Coiney. And then Janie Francis. What a great story of kindness and synchronicity.
I mean, in a way, you need to live it in Totnes to appreciate the sort of how the community is down here.
Oh.
It's very connected, and you know, if something happens, everyone knows about it. But you know, which can work in your favour or against it. But basically, what happened is that the phone dropped out of my pocket on the bus.
Yep.
I thought I'd lost it out in the woods somewhere, because I was going for a walk with my dear friends Inez and Claire, and but I thought, you know, the Totnesians is this website where, you know, people sort of talk about what's going on locally, and that's a perfectly good thing to post there. But that I lost my phone, and I said, I emailed Inez because I couldn't ring her, obviously, and I said, could you just phone my number a couple of times and see what happens to see if anyone's picked it up. The first time, no one picked it up. And then the second time, the bus driver, because the phone fell out of my pocket, the bus driver picked it up and said, yeah, I've got his phone. I'll be going through Totnes at 6:45. If you can get a message to him to be at the bus stop, I'll give him the phone back.
Oh.
I went to the bus stop, 6:45, and there was this lovely young woman driving the bus, and we had a lovely chat, and I got my phone back.
Oh, lovely. Lovely. And why Totnes? Why did you choose to live there?
It's a lovely place to live. It ticks all the boxes for me. Well, it ticks most of the boxes. It's quite a sort of, it's got a lot of interesting people living here. It's got a history of alternative culture that I enjoy, sustainability with the Schumacher College.
That's said about acceptance, just said he's familiar with Totnes, visit Dartmouth every year.
Ah, yes, a lovely place. I mean, the whole area is lovely. I mean, it's an easy place to live.
Yes, and I'm going to answer to is more Swansea. Yeah, he's just said small actions, the kindness of people in help, small gestures. Yeah, sometimes small gestures can
absolutely. I mean, yeah, absolutely.
Their lives also, like acts of kindness that you receive or you give, and you don't know how much that affects the person or what they're going through and how it.
Yeah, and I think we can bring kindness to every interaction. Every interaction, we can actually approach it with kindness, whether it's the woman on the checkout desk in the supermarket. Just bring kindness to that situation. I mean, it's amazing. Yeah. It's sort of transformational. We live in such a, in these difficult times
where people don't see each other. It's like
so much blame and confrontation, and you see it on social media. The way people are interacting with each other right now, it's not nice. We have to sort of we have to bring kindness into our lives. I think kindness is a really amazing. Just be kind. It doesn't take much effort to be kind. It doesn't take courage. We just have to do it.
Yeah, be kind. Chris, we still have quite a bit of things that I would like to talk, but Extinction Rebellion. What about Extinction Rebellion? Well, maybe we should do one conversation.
No,
Extinction Rebellion. Planet.
When you said, what do you want to know?
I want to know, like, your involvement, like being an activist, like suddenly saying, look, things are going bad, I need to do something about it.
Okay, well, yeah, I mean, we live in a time of collapse. There's no doubt about it, in my mind. Ecological collapse, habitats, the Amazon rainforests, weather patterns, they're collapsing. To me, that's without a shadow of a doubt. It's like the human industrial material project has run aground. We've had it. We've finished with. I'm not saying we're finished, but in terms of we can't carry on with this rapacious neoliberal ideology. It's destroying the planet. Not only. It's destroying languages. It's destroying indigenous cultures. It's destroying everything. I think it's invaded every aspect of our lives, much more than we even begin to realize. And I think it has to be challenged. And I think, you know, the climate emergency, it's not going away. It's already creating absolute chaos across the world. Millions of people have already been affected by it. Millions of people will be on the move and heading. So you know, the refugee crisis will become exacerbated in very, very short time. So yeah, we're in an urgent situation, and I think, you know, the COVID is also part of that. That destruction from habitats, you know.
Do you think COVID, it's in a way a cry out from nature, who's saying, guys, you are just going overboard now, you're destroying ourselves, you're destroying nature, everything. This needs to be curtailed.
Yeah, it's interesting how it's come about at this time. I mean, I think the more we destroy habitats, and the more we sort of invade, you know, places like the Amazon and you know, all these different places that are being destroyed by you know, farming and industry and all the rest of it. I think the more these, and the more that we intensify farming.
Yeah.
I think meat production is hideous. You know, I'm not going to proselytize about a plant-based diet, but I think it's another thing we've got to start embracing, because I think you know, this destruction of habitat, a lot of it is to actually you know, to provide food for beef and for you know, for intense animal rearing. So, you know, this combination of things, I mean, it's a shitstorm for planet Earth, really. And I think Extinction Rebellion are responding to that challenge. I think they emerged in 2018 with the audacious action of blocking the bridges, and since then, I mean, as an organisation, I think you know, they've put the climate on the front pages of newspapers. They've set the agenda, and you know, not perfect as an organisation. I think, like all organisations, they go sort of through a process and dips, but I think, you know, alive and kicking, and ready. Actually, you know, this year we've got the G7 conference down the road in Cornwall. You know, there's actions planned around that. Also, COP26 in Glasgow in November, which is going to be a huge motivation, because it's the next round of discussions, and I think things are getting so tight for our leaders now to actually come up with action, because I think, you know, we can't keep prevaricating. We can't wait for COP27, COP28, COP29. You know, we have to stop. We've got to actually act. And
time for action.
It's up to organisations like XR to really keep pushing the agenda, you know, and pushing it with direct action. You know, it has to be direct action. I think the conventional ways of protesting aren't working. It's too late. There's too much of an urgent calling for marching from A to B with banners. You know, it doesn't put any. You have to sort of you have to start using actions that somehow threaten the economic order. That's the only language that's understood, I think. Yeah.
And Chris, what about the Spring Up Foundation that you created with kids in 2017?
Yeah, these are all they require a lot of answering, actually.
One thing that I
have to go around the houses to get to that point of how it evolved. But so, as you know, since about 2006, I've been going to Palestine with this wonderful organization called Sangha Seva. And they're two very good friends of mine called Nathan and Zohar, and they set up this organization called Sangha Seva. And the idea was that we go into potentially challenging situations, and we spend time meditating together, and we then go in and we do something. And with Palestine, the idea was that we go to this village and we support the olive harvest every October, because during the olive harvest, the Palestinian farmers and their families are often attacked by the Israeli settlers, and attacked viciously. Their trees are burnt down, and they're violently attacked. And because during the olive harvest, a lot of the Palestinians are present, they're in the fields, and the Israeli settlers take advantage of that and use it as a premise to intimidate and attack the farmers while the army stands by and lets them get on with it. It's not attractive.
No.
So our role was initially to sort of just accompany the farmers into the fields, and the reason being that it seems, and I think it's been borne out, that the presence of groups of internationals with the Palestinians tends to deter their more aggressive behaviour. They tend to not want to be seen by internationals attacking farmers and setting fire to their trees and all the other. So that's basically it. And we started going to the village of Deir Istier, and we went every year. We're still very much, obviously last year we couldn't go because of COVID, but we go, usually a group of 12 of us go, around 12, and we stay in a little house in the village, all sleeping on the floor in mattresses. That little house that someone in the village has said we can use, which used to be the clinic. And every day we go out into the fields and pick olives, and it's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. And out of that, coming back to your question, we always ask the villagers, what is there anything else we can do that could be useful? And one year, 3 or 4 years ago, they said that we could help their young people because their studies were suffering because there wasn't enough money to pay for their education fees. Education's very expensive in Palestine, so we decided to set up an organisation to raise money for their bursaries, and that's what we did. And then that was in 2018. We organised a walk through the West Bank.
Yep.
A 10 walk, which was incredible, 120 miles from Jenin in the north to Jericho in the Jordan Valley. And we walked it, and we raised nearly £20,000, which got our organisation off the ground. It meant that we could start, and using that money to fund.
So do you have another walk coming up?
We've got a virtual walk coming up.
Mm-hmm.
So look at our website, which is springup.com.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're interested in participating in a virtual walk to Palestine and raising some money for student bursaries, you'd be very welcome.
Yes, and also the website is on the card and the picture that I put out.
Oh, good. Yeah,
website.
Yeah, good. Yeah, does that answer your question?
It does, Chris. And I think now it's time for us to wrap up. Thank you so much. Yes, and now it's gone. And
just warming up.
Just warming up. And Chris, because always when I meet you, you always say peace, and when we go as well, I heard this prayer by Satish Kumar and made me think of you. So I would like to finish by this world peace prayer that says,
I love Satish. He's a wonderful man.
Oh, lead me from death to life, from falsehood to truth. Lead me from despair to hope, from fear to trust. Lead me from hate to love, from war to
Exactly.
peace. Let peace fill our heart, our world, our universe. Peace, peace, peace. Thank you, Chris.
Talk to you, Karol. And I hope we meet in the not too distant future and have a little dance together.
Me too. Yes. Peace.
Great. See you, love. Bye.
You.
Bye now.
Bye.